Tonight on Primetime, the United States launches new strikes on southern Iran. But diplomatic talks continue as the world waits and hopes for a possible deal to end the conflict. So can diplomacy survive while strikes continue? Good evening. The United States says its latest strikes on southern Iran were carried out in self-defense, targeting missile sites and boats near the Strait of Hormuz. The developments come at a delicate moment, with diplomatic talks still underway in Doha and growing concern over the risk of wider disruption to global energy markets.
The US military says it has launched new strikes on southern Iran, targeting Iranian missile sites and boats attempting to place mines. US Central Command said in a statement the strikes were taken in self-defense and were designed to protect our troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Central Command spokesperson Captain Hawkins said the strikes targeted an area near Bandar Abbas, a southern port city and home of an Iranian naval base that sits on the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian state media had earlier reported that local officials in Bandar Abbas were investigating after explosions were heard. Iran is yet to respond to the latest US strikes. The attacks came as Iran's top negotiator and foreign minister were in Doha for talks with Qatar's Prime Minister on a possible deal with Washington to end the 3-month-old conflict. Despite the renewed tensions, Iranian state television said 32 vessels and 5 oil tankers passed through the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours, with authorization from Iran's Revolutionary Guard's naval forces. The standoff has caused a spike in oil prices and driven up the costs of fuel, fertilizer and food. On Monday, oil prices fell more than 4% to 2-week lows, amid optimism that a deal might come soon. Meantime, in his Truth Social post, Trump also called on more Arab and Muslim states to sign up to the Abraham Accords, brokered during his first term in office and aimed at normalizing ties between those states and Israel. Trump said Saudi Arabia and Qatar should immediately sign, and Pakistan, Egypt, Jordan and Turkey should follow suit, calling his request mandatory.
Well, Iran has sent a high-level delegation to Doha for these indirect talks on a possible agreement with the United States amid rising tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Our correspondent Toraz Shirililo reports now from Tehran.
A top-ranking delegation led by Parliament Speaker and Chief Negotiator Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf and comprising of Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Iran's Central Bank Governor Abdul Nasser Hemmati arrived in Doha, Qatar on Monday in a surprise visit. In the absence of official news about the high-profile visit, the combination of the delegation suggests that security, diplomatic and economic issues, including releasing Iran's frozen assets, estimated at $6 to $12 billion, are on the agenda of the talks in Doha. Moreover, lifting the U.S. blockade on the Iranian southern ports and the Strait of Hormuz, connecting the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman, is expected to top the agenda of the visit as outstanding stumbling block in the ongoing peace process mediations. Last Saturday, a high-ranking Qatari delegation visited Tehran, while Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir was in Iran's capital to negotiate the terms of an interim peace agreement between Iran and the United States. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said that Iran welcomed Qatar's renewed mediation efforts to broker a peace deal between Tehran and Washington, adding that Pakistan remains the main channel of mediated talks. Toraz Shirililo reporting from downtown Tehran for A News.
Well, joining us now is Bozu Daragahi, a long-time Middle East correspondent, to discuss the latest developments in the US-Iran conflict. Bozu, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Great to have you on Primetime. So the US says the recent strikes then were defensive. Can diplomacy really continue alongside active military operations like this?
It's completely incoherent. On the one hand, you want to build trust and build the foundation for some kind of diplomatic resolution. On the other hand, you're increasing suspicions that the Iranians already harbor that the diplomacy is just a prelude to the return to war. Twice already over the last year, negotiations were used as a cover for war preparations by the US and Israel against Iran. So this is basically going to undermine that diplomacy. Perhaps that's what Donald Trump wanted and expected. He made this announcement about the peace proposal. He was hammered on social media by the neoconservatives in Washington and other factions in Washington. And then he had to scramble to find ways of making it so that the deal wouldn't come to fruition.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, why do this? Was it a sort of a last attempt to demonstrate military prowess to appease right-wing conservatives, or was it, or was it not really a planned activity? Was it just accidental?
I don't think it was accidental. I think something like this, knowing the U.S. military chain of command and its integration into political decision making, I think that something like this big, would not just be handed off to local commanders in the sea or at CENTCOM. It would have to get some kind of approval from White House. But also, as your report pointed out earlier, he also threw up this absurd demand. It wasn't even a request. Demand that, like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Qatar, Turkey, all these countries that have been basically trying to save him by coming up with a diplomatic solution to this conflict, also saving their own economies. He basically punishes and humiliates them by ordering them to sign a peace deal with Israel at this moment, with this government, which is extremely toxic under Benjamin Netanyahu, especially post-Gaza. It was more a humiliation exercise against the people who are trying to bring about peace than any kind of honest effort to improve the prospect for a deal.
Okay, well, let's move on to Iran now. Iran has sent a high-level delegation to Qatar. I mean, that's a pretty positive sign, I guess. What does that signal about the seriousness of the negotiations and the likelihood that something could be achieved?
Well, I think that we have to say that the Iranians have been pretty professional and serious about this whole negotiation. And I just say that as someone calling balls and strikes. I'm not on the side of Iran or anything, but they've been playing conventional diplomacy. And they're saying, okay, we have all this complicated stuff that we have to deal with, nuclear issue, this history of mistrust. Let's put all of that aside for now and figure out a way to end the war and open up the strait to benefit everyone, because that's the immediate crisis. And then we can deal with the other stuff later. And meanwhile, they're trying to not front load the negotiations with a lot of difficult issues. Meanwhile, Trump keeps trying to front load the negotiations with a lot of difficult issues. And he also, a really big mistake, is negotiating in public. This is an amateurish move because when you bring these things out into the public while they're still in formation, you create opportunities for them to be sabotaged by various lobbies, not just in Washington, but also in Tehran.
Yeah, interesting point. I mean, Tehran, of course, has got its own demands, albeit expressed in different ways. One of them is to release frozen assets, reportedly up to $24 billion worth. How central is this to any potential deal, and how likely is it, rather, that something like this could be achieved?
I think it's really important. I think that's the main goal of the Iranians right now. They need cold, hard cash, and they need it immediately. This whole crisis began with protests over the economy that were later somewhat exploited by Israel and the United States to launch this war. They don't want a repeat of that. They want to rebuild the country's infrastructure. Unemployment has increased. As a sign of how important the economy has been, despite this crisis, just hours ago, Iran restored internet access. That's not because they love the Iranian people. The regime is wanting to give people freedom of speech and access to the world. That's because the internet is an important part of the Iranian economy, and people have been really struggling in the country with unemployment and inability to make ends meet. And the issue of sanctions relief and or the unfreezing of funds is going to be very important.
And Bourzi, this linking of a possible agreement with Iran to the wider normalization through the Abraham Accords, as you've touched on, how realistic is that? And also, does Mr. Trump think it's going to happen? If he doesn't, why is he suggesting it?
I mean, I'm not sure what's going on in this man's head, and that's maybe a problem for a lot of people, is that he's very unpredictable and rash and emotional and not really acting out of logic. But, you know, in terms of whether that's a realistic proposition, if I were his advisors, I would say that's a non-starter, and that is not going to work. But he's also destroyed the diplomatic corps in the United States. He doesn't listen to the CIA. He doesn't listen to the experts. So he's basically surrounded himself with a coterie of rather corrupt people who are basically whispering various stuff in his ear, shaping his agenda. Marco Rubio on Cuba and Venezuela, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff on Middle East issues. These are not normal people. These are people with business and ideological interests. They're the ones advising him. So it's quite possible he was told, yeah, let's put this in as a poison pill, thinking that it would work, whereas those people who were whispering this to him knew that it would sabotage any deal.
And finally, Bourzi, you know the Middle East better than most. In your experience, from what you've seen in recent weeks, should we be hopeful about some kind of deal, do you think, emerging from these talks?
Well, I think that today was a really good sign that no, I don't think we should be. I think there's still a 60% chance there'll be another wave of airstrikes on Iran, and that would be followed by devastating counter strikes on Saudi and Qatari and definitely UAE, United Arab Emirates, energy infrastructure, and that will definitely hurt the global economy even more. We're already going to experience some pain, maybe not so much Azerbaijan because it has so much natural gas, but there's going to be like an energy crunch all over the world in the coming months, no matter what anyone does. And we're at this point trying to ameliorate the damage, trying to prevent the damage from getting too out of hand. And I have a feeling that things are going to get a little bit worse before they get any better.
Bourzi, delighted to have you on the show. We thank you for your analysis very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, after the break, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio visits Yerevan as Armenia's foreign policy comes into focus. Don't go away. A warm welcome back to Primetime, wherever you're watching. Armenia and the United States have initialed a strategic partnership framework under the TRIP initiative, or the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, alongside a comprehensive strategic partnership charter. Now, the package also includes agreements on critical minerals and rare earth metals, covering extraction, processing and supply chains, as well as cooperation on a proposed 43-kilometre transit corridor in southern Armenia, linking Azerbaijan to its Nakhchivan exclave and Turkey. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the deal marks a new phase in relations focused on economic cooperation, innovation and secure access to critical minerals.
Today, by renewing the Strategic Partnership Charter, it's an opportunity to outline the future of the U.S.-Armenia bilateral relationship and creating a new path for partnership and economic opportunity for Armenians and for Americans. Finally, we also, on the Memorandum of Understanding on critical minerals, is also going to further enhance mutual prosperity. Countries that are able to do that are going to be able to find economic independence and are going to be able to find themselves at the center of innovation in the 21st century. And those who lag behind are going to suffer for it. We are going to be able to work together to make sure that both of our countries, both of our economies, are going to have reliable access to these critical minerals.
Well, I'm joined now by our very own Anastasia Lavrina, host, of course, of A News' Inside Politics and Frontline. Anastasia, very good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
In the studio. How significant is this US-Armenia MOU then in terms of strategy?
Well, indeed, Guy, so many expert opinion now, and we see the clear division. Some experts are saying that this visit and the signed documents indeed play a very important role in Armenian future development, and there are some other more skeptical attitudes who are saying that it has nothing to do with the upcoming elections in Armenia, and overall it's just basic things. But in my understanding, indeed, this visit plays a very important role for the future processes which will take place in the region itself, not only for Armenia, I would like to say. So by signing these documents, which is also, as it was rightly pointed out, have the important part on the future trip project development, or how we call it here, the Zangezur corridor, that's indeed very relevant and very important issue. Despite the processes taking place in the Middle East, we can see that the United States continues to pay important attention to the processes in the region of the South Caucasus and the future development of the peace-building process between Armenia and Azerbaijan as TRIP. It's an exact project which will, let's say, play a very important role for the future development to connect Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan exclave through the territory of Armenia and then further to Turkey and European Union. Well, indeed, that's very important. Another strategic, I guess, comprehensive strategic partnership charter, which was also signed by two sides, shows that our countries are willing to expand the scope of cooperation in different spheres. And I guess it was a very big signal by Washington, demonstrating that they fully support the processes taking place in Armenia itself, specifically before the elections, which will take place on 7th of June. Yes. Specifically, the processes of more pro-Western policy, which is being supported by Nikol Pashinyan. And now I will say that is a key difference on issue on how Pashinyan is trying to possess the future of Armenia in case of his winery. If it happens, then we should expect Armenia to have more close integration with the European Union, with the Western countries, with the United States. And just recently it was stated that Armenia is planning to have free visa regime with the European Union. Whether it will take only 2 years or more, but that is on the agenda, and that's how Nikol Pashinyan is showing more pro-Western orientation of his country. And then the memorandum on the supply of rare earth elements and critical minerals, which was also signed. That's very important for the future economic development of Armenia, specifically in its policy of diversification, to have a diversified energy and economy development, not to be so much dependence on Russia as it's happened before, but have more pro-Western but still balanced economic development in the region.
Yeah, and that balance is very tricky, isn't it? I mean, do you think it's fair to say that Armenia is shifting away from Russia, or is that a bit simplistic? Is it sort of more accurate to say that it's balancing between competing powers?
I would call it as development of a balanced policy, diversified policy, as for today Armenia cannot stop full cooperation with Russia due to its economic and energy dependency on Russia. But it was a right course which Nikol Pashinyan is following within the last years, specifically after 2023, having more diversified approach to the project. But we cannot ignore the fact that still Armenia have huge dependence on the energy supply, gas supply from Russia, then most of its products still are being exported to Russia. And even from the security points of view, yes, we can see the attempts to diversify its security policy and have new agreements with countries like France, the United States. But as for today, the military base of Russia is still on the territory of Armenia, and the Russian military forces are on the territory of Armenia. Therefore, there is a big question on how the upcoming elections will affect the foreign policy of Armenia, whether it will continue having more pro-Western orientation, or Nikol Pashinyan, or the person who will come to power, will try to have more balanced approach to the relations. But in any case, that's a very difficult process. We already can see some dissatisfaction in Russia, specifically if before it was only the expert opinion criticizing the decision of Armenia to have more pro-Western orientation, then now it's even the policymakers in Russia who are criticizing openly the decision of Nikol Pashinyan to have more European integration, specifically mentioning that Armenia is still a member of Eurasian Economic Union, as even Russian President Vladimir Putin previously stated that Armenia has to make a choice whether it's still staying in this Eurasian Economic Union, benefiting the gas prices, for example, or it has more European orientation, and then Armenia will have to buy the gas by the prices which is being released by Russia for European countries. Yes, Nikol Pashinyan is trying to explain the situation from the legal perspective, meaning that in case if we have any kind, they have any kind of signed agreement with Russia, then of course the prices should be the same in the future. But the changes are expected in case of more pro-Western orientation. And also the presence of Armenia as a collective security treaty organization. Yes, the presence and the membership was frozen, but Armenia is still a member of this structure. So I guess there will be there's a time for a tough decision for Nikol Pashinyan, or who will be in power of that country, how exactly this balanced policy to be continued in the upcoming months or even the years.
Yeah, it's interesting you say, because they were told off, weren't they, by Russia for not attending meetings, a bit like a boss who's angry that he didn't turn up to a conference call. This, though, surely will now put even more strain on that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely, but it can be understandable. The upcoming elections, which will take place in Armenia very soon, that's probably the main reason why Nikol Pashinyan decided not to attend this summit. But overall, we can see the rhetorics in Russian circles, political circles, and the huge dissatisfaction of the Armenian pro-Western orientation. Even there, some conditions are being put to Armenia, and we can see already some restrictions. Let's say the flowers which were previously exported from Armenia to Russia, there were put some restrictions on the exports. Then the products, even the water which was exported from Armenia to Russia, they were made a decision not to import it right now due to some, let's say, specific elements in the products which are not allowed to be imported to Russian Federation.
So those economic warnings then from Russia, they do have a certain credibility about them.
They do have, and we cannot ignore the fact, as I previously say, that if we compare the economic partnership of Armenia and the number of products which are being exported to Russia and to Europe, we will see that the numbers are of those products to be exported to Russia much higher than the same elements to be exported to other countries. Therefore, it will take time for Armenia also to diversify its partners, to sign new agreements, to verify the products which will be exported to Turkey, Georgia, maybe Azerbaijan in the future, or European markets. So it will definitely take the time. But for Russia, it's the biggest economic partner for Armenia at the moment. And of course, Russia can put some pressure on Armenia. And before this interview, I even listened to the interview of some experts who are saying that not even the sanctions, but restrictions were put against the products in Armenia to the companies who are providing tough support to the election campaign of the prime minister, meaning that those companies who have more pro-Russian orientations, they didn't face any challenges at the moment. That's indeed very interesting element. From one side, of course, we can understand the position of Moscow here, and they're not willing to lose its I would say, main ally in the South Caucasus, and they of course don't want to see the same scenario as it's happened in Ukraine. They do not need this. But on the other side, as it was also mentioned by the Marco Rubio during his visit, very short visit to Armenia, Washington fully support the sovereignty of Armenia and the future, let's say, a policy to follow the requirements of Western standards and its pro-Western orientation. I think that what is really important for Armenian government at the moment is to have more, let's say, quick reaction to the processes which is taking place in the region of the South Caucasus, as from the future integration with the neighbors, with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and the signing of the comprehensive peace agreement with Azerbaijan will definitely have more positive outcomes for and benefits for Armenia, its economic development, opening of transport corridors, economic integration, energy projects, as in case of any, let's say, challenges and problems in cooperation with Russia, Armenia will have to find new countries and new partners in its energy policy. Iran can cover just little amount of Armenian needs in the gas. Therefore, there should be more as a partners to work with. And we already can see that new projects are being opened, specifically in transport sphere in Turkey. There is already on the agenda, together with Georgia and Turkey. We know about cargo flows from Azerbaijan to Armenia, specifically even those coming from Russia and Kazakhstan through the territory of Azerbaijan. So as quick as Armenia is ready to sign the comprehensive peace agreement with Azerbaijan to open the border with two countries in the region, Azerbaijan and Turkey, it will also have positive consequences for the future policy of diversification which Yerevan is willing to follow.
A lot of positives there, Anastasia. I mean, this is a difficult job, this balancing act that Armenia has to engage with other partners whilst also not completely severing ties with Moscow. Are you hopeful that that's something that can be achieved?
Yes, I'm quite optimistic about the future processes, but again, much will depend on the outcomes of the upcoming elections, as the other candidates who are also willing to come to power, they have more pro-Russian oriented policy, and even there were some statements who criticized the policy of Nikol Pashinyan to have this rapprochement with Azerbaijan. Of course, we cannot ignore the fact of the existence of the strong Armenian lobby in a number of countries who are also against the peaceful coexistence between two countries in our region, Azerbaijan and Armenia. But this visit of Marco Rubio to Armenia, I guess it was a good signal for Armenian lobby in the United States, specifically that ANCA committee, who already expressed too much dissatisfaction with the peaceful agenda in the region. That's a good signal to show that United States is willing to see the peaceful development, peaceful agenda in the region, specifically if Donald Trump is so much concentrated on the successful implementation of TRIP, the project which is put under his name. I'm sure that Washington will do its best to have more quick realization of this project. And this project is a very, very good opportunity for two countries and for the region itself to turn the page of the war. And just shortly, remember after the end of the 44 days war in 2020, it was President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, who openly stated that the future economic integration and the projects in the region will benefit not only Azerbaijan but also Armenia. And 5 years after, 6 years after, we can see that it was the right statements. And indeed, from the successful implementation and realization of a new economic projects, all countries in the region will be benefited. And absolutely, that's in the interest of European Union and Washington, United States as well.
Anastasia, always great to see you, always great to get your analysis. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories shaping the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime. Andy Mioch has joined us to bring us the very latest business news. Andy, what have you got on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, oil prices are as mixed as the signals coming out of the Middle East. Oil giant BP ousted its chair. Ferrari unveiled its first fully electric car. And there's some trouble brewing for Starbucks in South Korea. So let's have a look. First up, oil prices rose after fresh U.S. strikes in southern Iran dampened investors' hopes that a peace deal could be imminent. Still, there was some underlying optimism in the market that the Strait of Hormuz might reopen soon.
Brent crude oil futures traded around $99 per barrel on Tuesday, as markets balanced optimism over ongoing US-Iran negotiations against renewed military operations in southern Iran. Reports said the US military targeted missile launch sites and vessels suspected of preparing to deploy mines, with US Central Command stating the actions were intended to protect American forces in the region. At the same time, US President Donald Trump said discussions with Tehran were progressing positively, but warned that further strikes could follow if talks collapse. The US and Iran are currently negotiating a framework to extend the ceasefire by around 2 months, during which Washington would ease its blockade while Tehran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Oil giant BP has ousted its chair, Albert Manifold, following serious concerns over governance standards, oversight, and conduct. In a statement, BP said Manifold would step down as chair with immediate effect. The company didn't give details of the alleged conduct or governance failings.
The British oil giant BP said on Tuesday that it had removed its chair, Albert Manifold, saying that the board had serious concerns about his governance and conduct less than a year after he was appointed. The company did not elaborate on the details of the ouster, but said Ian Tyler would serve as interim chair. Manifold's tenure at BP was brief. He joined the board in September and was appointed chair a month later. BP has gone through a series of leadership changes in recent years amid investor discontent over its strategy and performance. BP's share price has been hit by the shock removal and was briefly down 9%, forcing a short halt to trading.
In pharma news, Eli Lilly announced plans to buy 3 early and mid-stage vaccine developers for up to nearly $4 billion. The 3 companies are working on shots against pathogens that can cause long-term health issues.
Eli Lilly on Tuesday announced plans to acquire 3 companies for almost $4 billion in cash, as it looks to expand its research and development business into infectious diseases. The company said it had agreed deals to buy Curevo, Limitech Biologics and Vaccine Company. Shares of Eli Lilly rose 0.9% shortly after the market opened. Eli Lilly, best known for its blockbuster weight loss and diabetes drugs, saw strong demand for its flagship products Zepbound and Mounjaro, with first quarter revenue in the US for each product coming in at $4.1 billion and $4.2 billion, respectively. As it faces fierce competition from Wegovy maker Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly has rolled out its newly approved GLP-1 obesity pill Foundayo in the second quarter. The company maintained a 60.1% share of the US obesity and drug market in the first quarter, with Novo Nordisk holding a 39.4% share.
Over in South Korea, the company operating the local unit of Starbucks issued a public apology over a marketing campaign that evoked a brutal military crackdown of 1980. The Tank Day campaign triggered anti-Starbucks protests, with locals smashing their branded cups, and has left a mark on the coffee chain's sales.
Starbucks faces a very significant drop in sales in South Korea after a public outcry over its Tank Day tumbler marketing campaign. That's according to an official from operator Shinsegae Group. The retailer, whose subsidiary E-Mart owns the coffee chain in South Korea, has faced mounting criticism after the promotional campaign was launched on the anniversary of 1980's May 18th Gwangju uprising. That event saw the country's then military government deploy troops and tanks to suppress pro-democracy demonstrations, leaving hundreds dead or missing. According to the official, Starbucks Korea's e-commerce team organized the campaign and received final approval from team leaders and executives. On Tuesday, Shinsegae Group Chairman Chung Yong-jin made a public apology over what he called inappropriate marketing that hurt and angered many people. Shares in Shinsegae were down over 2% by mid-afternoon in Seoul, though E-Mart saw gains. The parent company fired the head of Starbucks Korea last week after apologizing over the campaign. Starbucks Global also apologized and said an investigation had begun.
In a first, Italy's luxury sports car maker Ferrari unveiled a fully electric model. Deliveries of the 5-seat EV Luce, meaning light in Italian, are set to begin later this year.
Ferrari presented its first fully electric car on Monday, marking a high-stakes shift by the luxury sports car maker as competitors, including Porsche and Lamborghini, scale back their EV ambitions, citing weak demand. The four-door Luce, Italian for light, was developed with the help of former Apple design chief Johnny Ive and his collective Love From, and is Ferrari's first five-seater. Ferrari aims to appeal to families with deep pockets, offering them comfortable seats, high-end tech and a 600-litre boot. Deliveries of the long-awaited Luce, priced at €550,000, are due to begin in the fourth quarter of 2026. The Luce, which amplifies natural vibration sounds from its EV powertrain to maintain the visceral appeal of a traditional Ferrari, marks a gamble that a generation steeped in technology and AI, and less linked to a 12- and 8-cylinder engine legacy, will shift to high-tech luxury EVs. That would also offer Ferrari a chance for deeper penetration in markets such as China, where EVs are widespread and big petrol cars are heavily taxed.
And finally, in streaming news, Spotify is introducing narrated magazine articles from top publications in an effort to diversify content. The company says the long-form articles will be available to users with access to audiobooks.
Spotify said on Tuesday it is rolling out narrated articles from top publications including Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, Vogue, Variety and Vanity Fair for its audiobook users as the platform diversifies its content. The Swedish streaming giant will offer more than 650 long-form magazine articles in the English language to users with access to audiobooks. Spotify co-CEO Alex Norström said recently that the company has already captured roughly 20% of the audiobooks market in the United States. The curated collection of narrated articles, produced by Spotify's in-house audiobooks team, will be under 2 hours in length, according to the company. Last week, Spotify announced a deal with Universal Music Group to let subscribers create AI-generated covers and remixes of tracks by some of the label's artists.
And that'd be all in the business brief for tonight. Hand it back to you, Guy.
Andy, I probably should let viewers know that when we were off camera just then, we were debating whether or not you and I would actually like to drive an electric Ferrari. I have to say, my wife often tells me I worry about things that are never going to happen, and there is a classic example.
Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll look at the resumption of the Baku-Tbilisi passenger rail link after a 6-year hiatus as Azerbaijan and Georgia deepen their cooperation. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. The Baku-Tbilisi night train is back after a 6-year pause, restoring one of the South Caucasus' busiest cross-border links. Well, the first service arrived in Georgia this morning with daily sleeper trains now reconnecting the two capitals by rail. ANews's Nini Nikolashvili reports.
The Baku-Tbilisi route was once one of the most popular in the South Caucasus. Before the pandemic shattered Azerbaijan's land borders in 2020, the nightly train was nearly always full with business travelers, families, and weekend visitors. For 6 years, the only way between the two capitals was by air. That changed overnight. The first train departed Baku at 11:10, pulled into Tbilisi Central Station at 9:04 a.m. this morning. The return journey from Tbilisi leaves at 9 p.m., arriving in Baku just after 6 the next morning. The trains themselves are worth noting. They are Stadler rail coaches, Swiss-built modern sleeper cars, originally purchased by Azerbaijan Railways back in 2019 for an even more ambitious route, Baku to Istanbul via Ars. The pandemic put those plans on hold and the trains sat idle for years, but today they finally made their debut run. The revival was sealed officially this month when Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Qobakhidze signed a joint agreement in Baku on the sidelines of the World Urban Forum.
Hello, and congratulations on today's occasion. As you know, after a 6-year pause, we have some great news. Railway service between Georgia and Azerbaijan has resumed. This is a very important route, especially considering that starting today, the service will operate daily. Demand is high. In just a few days, a very large number of tickets have already been sold. So congratulations, because this is a successful project that we will continue to develop together with our Azerbaijani colleagues. From today onward, trains on the Baku-Tbilisi and Tbilisi-Baku routes will run every day.
First of all, congratulations on Independence Day, the most important national holiday for our country. Freedom is, of course, a great achievement, and it is the responsibility of each and every one of us to protect it. Today is also significant because after a 6-year pause, the Baku-Tbilisi railway service has resumed. Starting from May 26th, this route will operate daily. Our citizens of Azerbaijan, and tourists alike will have the opportunity to travel by train. This is a very important and welcome decision that was made during the Prime Minister's visit to Baku. Naturally, this decision will contribute to the development of the economy and tourism, as well as strengthen ties between our peoples.
Tickets start at 81 Azerbaijani manats, around 127 Georgian lari for the full Baku-Tbilisi route. Passengers should factor in up to 2 hours for border procedures, with 1 hour allocated at each crossing. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Joining us now in the studio is A-News's Nigar Shirinova to break down what the return of the Baku-Tbilisi passenger rail service means for regional connectivity. Nigar, great to have you back with us in the studio. It's back then after 6 years. What do you think this indicates about Azerbaijan-Georgia relations?
So we can definitely say that finally, after 6 years, it's a big development that the resumption of Baku-Tbilisi railway, passenger railway, is back, and many people are happy for that. So it's a much bigger for us. It's not just a transport story, and it's more about connectivity, restoring connectivity, people-to-people relationship between these two countries, and also strategic relations between Baku and Georgia. And the railway, these passenger trains have been suspended from 2020, from the COVID era time, coronavirus, when we had it in 2020, and we were having the border restrictions all over the world, and it was suspended back then. And after 6 years, now the passenger trains are open, are back, and we already saw the first travelers of this train. It's back from yesterday night. And that's a great development, and it's not only the mobility between the people, but also it's more about the regional connectivity and economic normalization as well, because it's really something positive, something big for the economic interaction between these two countries. And I would like also to mention the political side of this, because this was decided and announced to people and to media during the World Urban Forum 13th edition, which was in Baku last week. And it was done in a political level. When Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Qobakhidze visited Baku and had talks with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, and it was discussed back then, and it was decided, announced, and it got a really huge amount of attention and positive attention. I would like to mention this, and this is not just a technical railway announcement. This is very big for the region, and also in political level it's done by the heads of the governments, and this is definitely something positive for both sides.
And Nigar, it's a sleeper train, of course, which always creates an amazing experience, a memorable experience for people. So presumably, as well as trade, it's going to be really attractive for tourists too.
Yes. So it has many pluses, many advantages. It's for tourism, for businesses, for connectivity of people, for economy, and I think that the main emphasis here should be on human interaction, human to human, Azerbaijanis and Georgians, because we also have the Azerbaijani community in Georgia who are living there and who were relying on this train routes, on this railway too much, and it was affordable. It's much cheaper than planes, and it also gives you different impression when you are traveling by train. For tourism, as you mentioned, definitely it's a big advantage because when I checked the statistics of tourism, after 2020, of course, there are several indicators, several reasons to this tourism decrease level. We went through many things. It was COVID era, border closure, and many other things, but it really affected on the tourism level. Now Azerbaijanis and Georgians will be able to travel to Baku and Tbilisi, and also these are the overnight trains, so it means from Baku to Tbilisi overnight, and back is from Tbilisi to Baku overnight train, and this is much affordable. It's affordable, convenient, and comfortable for people. Also for businesses, it's very important because I would mention that for small and medium businesses, it's important. Regional entrepreneurs, it has a very big meaning for them as well. And human interaction, Azerbaijani communities living there, they were relying on them because it's like much cheaper than plane tickets.
Okay, I'm sold. So I really want to go on this journey.
Okay.
In our family, we live in Baku. There's me, my wife, my son, and my daughter. We've got 2 dogs, but I'm pretty sure they can't come. So for the 4 of us to travel, firstly, will we get a ticket? And if we do, how much will it cost us?
Okay. So from yesterday night, it's open to everyone. So regular passengers, of course, they can just go to websites or to the railway station and to get the tickets. So that's a really great opportunity. I'm very happy that you would like to go, and I would like to go as well, by the way. And as I know, the tickets are, so in your family you are 2 adults and 2 children. For adults, if I'm not mistaken, the tickets are starting from 81 Azerbaijani manads till 120 Azerbaijani manads, which is, for our international audience, I would try to transfer it. It's something between 50 and 70 US dollars. And for children, there are discounted prices. So it should be something around 50 Azerbaijani manads and 8 Azerbaijani manads, which is 30, 50 US dollars. And also, it depends on the cabin which you are taking, and also your comfort level, because now the trains, I forgot to mention that now the trains are Stadler trains, which are modernized, and which also mean a lot, because 6 years ago we were having the old trains, and now they started to have these Stadler new trains, which means also they not only this is not only about connectivity, but also they modernize this connectivity level in the region, which means a lot. So in these 6 years, there is an effort to improve and to make it better for travelers. And if you take the family cabin, it would be a bit higher, but it's definitely a higher comfort level as well.
Yes.
So I would say for a family of 4, of course it depends on the comfort level which you are choosing. It will be between 500 Azerbaijani manads and roughly 700 Azerbaijani manads, which is 300 and 500 United States dollars.
Great value for what I'm sure is an unforgettable experience. Okay, less about my family holidays now, back to the geopolitics. This is not the first agreement, partnership, collaboration we've seen between Azerbaijan and Georgia recently, is it? Tell us about relations, because it looks like things are going in an increasingly positive direction.
Yes, definitely. And honestly, I would say that it's not, during the Irakli Kobakhidze's visit to Azerbaijan, there were several agreements signed, and with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. They were having meetings and talks, but honestly, these were here for a long period of time, and it's not something new. It's already there for 20 years because Azerbaijan and Georgia are very strategic allies and neighbor countries in South Caucasus, and we hugely depend on each other for different reasons, for connectivity, for regional stability, just being South Caucasus countries, and for energy security, for energy transport routes that we have. And definitely there were many agreements signed this time as well. As I know, the railway coordination was signed, also the energy cooperation deals, and also it was discussed about the future collaborations and electricity and gas supply, if I'm not mistaken, the electricity, transport and long-term gas supplies were discussed in this meeting.
So it's energy and trade that kind of underpins that kind of political and cultural tie.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that energy is a backbone of Azerbaijan-Georgia relations, and this was here for a long period of time, and it's still there now with the visits, official visits, government level visits and talks, meetings which are held. This is improving, and we are seeing more tangible results from this. And of course, Azerbaijan is benefiting from this because of the Azerbaijani oil and gas and transport routes. And we have very important strategic projects, which is, for example, the Southern Gas Corridor, which is going through the South Caucasus, Baku and Tbilisi, Azerbaijan and Georgia. Then Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, which we have, the South Caucasus pipeline, and also Baku-Tbilisi Kars Railway, which we have, and which Azerbaijan and Georgia are benefiting together. And without Georgia, Azerbaijan's overland border, overland access to Turkey and Europe would be, of course, much harder and more limited. So Georgia is very important for Azerbaijan, of course. Azerbaijan is giving the investment and energy transport to Georgia, and also Georgia is also giving access to Black Sea, to European countries, for Azerbaijan. And without Azerbaijan, of course, Georgia would lose the major energy supplier and transit revenues, and also part of its regional importance. And Georgia, for Azerbaijan, Georgia is not just a neighbor, it's also a very important strategic ally and strategic partner, which is in the region. And despite even all the geopolitical tensions which we had in this region, there are always tensions. Russia-Ukraine conflict there, and Russia-EU dynamics which were happening, and lately the Middle East conflict. Despite all these geopolitical tensions, Georgia and Azerbaijan were always good partners in the region, and they are continuing this partnership more and more.
It's a great story. Nigar, always great to see you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, after the break, we'll look at Russia's warning of new strikes targeting military and political infrastructure in Kyiv as renewed attacks fuel fears of a dangerous new phase in the war. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Russia has issued a fresh warning of intensified strikes targeting Kyiv's defense and command infrastructure, while urging foreign diplomats to leave the capital. Well, the warning comes after Russian attacks killed 8 civilians and injured more than 100 others across Ukraine, raising renewed fears of further escalation.
Russia has threatened a new wave of systematic strikes on Kyiv on Monday, days after launching one of the largest attacks on the Ukrainian capital since the start of the war. In a statement, Russia's foreign ministry said the strikes would target Ukraine's defense industry facilities, drone production sites, decision-making centers, and military command posts in Kyiv. Moscow also urged foreign nationals and diplomats to leave the city as soon as possible and warned civilians to stay away from administrative and military buildings. The warning came after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held a phone call with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Monday. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov informed Rubio that Moscow planned strikes on decision-making centers and advised the United States to evacuate diplomatic personnel from Kyiv. Ukraine condemned the threats as shameless blackmail aimed at intimidating civilians and the diplomatic community. Speaking in Kyiv alongside Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tikhanovskaya, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha urged allies not to give in to Russian pressure.
We are currently telling our partners that there is no need to give in to this Russian blackmail. We have been through all of this before, and we know when Russian President Vladimir Putin amps up this rhetoric.
The latest tensions follow a massive overnight Russian assault on Kyiv and other regions, which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said killed 4 people and injured around 100 others. Ukraine has also called for emergency meetings of the United Nations Security Council and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe following the recent attacks.
Well, joining us now is Maria Zolkina, Head of Regional Security at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Maria, great to have you on the show with us. Thank you for joining us tonight on Primetime. How significant is this warning by Russia then, and the evacuation advice also for diplomats?
I wouldn't overestimate these so-called advices from Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs because they never used it publicly before the large-scale invasion of Ukraine was started in February 2022, though the intelligence service of US and other Western partners of Ukraine were well aware of the preparation of Russia's attacks on Ukraine in 2022. So I do think that there is a different audience rather than the foreign embassies in Ukraine, and this audience is mainly Ukrainian public. In particular, amid the new diplomatic reality we have in Russia-Ukrainian conflict, we do remember the latest announcements from US that they are not going to play as active role as a mediator as they tried to play during 2025. And in this vacuum, let's say, of negotiation process handled by anyone, because Europe is just trying to occupy this place instead of US, Russia is trying to double down on attacks on Ukraine's heartland and civilian infrastructure.
Moscow says it's targeting decision-making centres. I mean, that's quite a vague statement. What do you think it means?
I think that the number of foreign, not just Ukrainian, but also foreign journalists working on the ground showed practically in details how the large residential blocks of Ukrainian residential districts inside the center of the Kyiv and a little bit to the let's say residential areas of the city were targeted within the last week. And I would say that, of course, Russia is trying to target some facilities where, according to some sources, they think that there is some production of drones or some components for some other weapons for Ukraine. But these facilities are not in the very center of Kyiv. They are not in Pechersk district. And we have all seen the number of hospitals, the number of clinics, and the most important, the whole blocks inside of residential areas in Kyiv to be attacked and to be, unfortunately, totally destroyed.
Maria, to what extent are Ukrainian strikes inside Russia aimed at creating strategic pressure? Is that something that you feel is working?
I think that is working perfectly well, regardless of how Russia is trying to retaliate, let's say, as they explain their logic afterwards. Since the beginning of the large-scale invasion, Ukraine has increased the range of its deep strikes inside Russia from 200 kilometers maximum, as it was in 2022-2023, up until 1,750 kilometers deep inside Russia's heartland. The latest confirmed news was when Ukraine targeted some military facilities deep inside Republic of Komi, deep inside Russia, and surely the number of confirmed heated military and especially oil refinery facilities on the Black Sea and Baltic Sea have undermined the position of Russia in negotiations and have created disbalance towards slight favor which Ukraine has on the battlefield during last month. So we have a kind of a paradox when on the one hand there was no diplomatic advances and US was totally, for instance, occupied with what they have started on the war in Iran. But on the other hand, within this last several months, up to 6 months, Ukraine has doubled down on increase of drones, has improved its anti-drones air defense system, and has severely doubled down on deep strikes on oil refineries of Russia, oil production facilities deep inside Russia, and military facilities of Russia deep inside Russia's heartland. And this has definitely changed situation to at least having a balance. And I would slightly optimistically say that partially to a balance favoring Ukraine on the battlefield. And Russia, as they have using normally in their logic, is, as they are saying, hitting, or retaliating to change situation back in the favor of Russia, hitting Ukrainian civilians.
And finally, Maria, and this is a question we've been asking many experts recently, is there any realistic diplomatic off-ramp, do you think, to this conflict? Or is this just becoming a prolonged escalation cycle?
I don't have any illusions about any kind of a diplomatic breakthrough, and I have seen that many stages of the diplomatic, negotiations started from 2014. As I'm originally from Donbass and have been working professionally on all the stages of this conflict resolution for 12 years already. In my opinion, the maximum possible result we can get right now is a kind of a ceasefire or decrease or de-intensification of warfare and the battlefield, not because the position of Russia and Ukraine has been closer one to another in terms of what is needed for both sides to end of the conflict. We still have a huge gap here, and something Ukraine is not able to accept and something Russia is not able to refuse from, speaking like territorial concessions, for instance. However, this kind of a ceasefire or desintensification of the warfare may be a result of the kind of a balance when no party can prevail, and for this reason active warfare might be stopped. But this will be the maximum result as for now.
Maria, pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Former chief executive of the Scottish National Party, Peter Murrell, has pleaded guilty to embezzling more than £400,000 in party funds in a case that further damages confidence in the party's leadership and finances. Our correspondent Anita Sharma reports now.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where one of Scotland's most explosive political scandals takes a dramatic turn. Peter Murrell, the former chief executive of Scotland's once dominant Scottish National Party, or SNP, pleaded guilty to embezzling more than £400,000, or $540,000 from party funds over more than a decade. That figure is £60,000 less than the amount he originally faced. Murrell was one of the most powerful figures in Scottish politics, running the SNP's operations for years, while his then-wife, Nicola Sturgeon, served as Scotland's First Minister and as the public face of the independence movement. In court, Murrell admitted diverting party money between 2010 and 2023 to fund personal spending, including several vehicles, a motorhome, and luxury purchases from companies such as Estée Lauder and Harrods. He was remanded in custody and due to be sentenced on June 23rd. The case is the latest chapter in a scandal that has badly damaged the SNP's credibility, particularly over questions surrounding financial transparency and the handling of donations, including money raised from supporters who believed it would be ring-fenced for Scotland's independence campaign. Sturgeon was previously investigated and later cleared of any wrongdoing. After Murrell's plea, she said she had, quote, no knowledge or suspicion whatsoever that he was using SNP funds for personal purposes. She also said she was, quote, utterly appalled and misled, just as others were. The SNP is currently led by John Swinney, who called Murrell's plea a terrible breach of trust and an overwhelming betrayal. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has held talks with Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq amid growing concern over renewed instability in the Middle East and reports of fresh US strikes on Iranian targets. Well, the call comes as regional powers step up diplomatic efforts to prevent escalation around the Persian Gulf and the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. Our correspondent Adam Morrow reports now from Istanbul.
Turkey is continuing its diplomatic outreach across the Gulf as concerns grow over the possibility of a broader regional confrontation involving Iran and the United States. According to the Turkish Communications Directorate, President Erdogan told Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq on Monday that sustained diplomatic engagement remains essential to preventing further escalation in the region. Erdogan reportedly said that renewed conflict would serve no one's interests, adding that Turkey and what he described as the region's brotherly countries were continuing efforts aimed at securing lasting peace and stability. The Turkish leader also reaffirmed Ankara's support for Palestinian rights on every platform. The timing of the phone call is especially significant as it comes amid stepped-up diplomatic activity surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important maritime energy corridors. Just one day earlier, Oman's foreign minister, Badr al-Busaidi, met Iran's deputy foreign minister for legal affairs in Muscat, where the two sides reportedly discussed proposals for the joint management of the Strait of Hormuz. The strategic waterway handles roughly 1/5 of globally traded oil, meaning that any instability there has immediate implications for global energy markets and shipping routes. Tensions, meanwhile, rose further on Monday evening after reports that the United States had carried out fresh strikes on Iranian targets, fueling fears that the region may be entering another dangerous phase. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Afghanistan's defense minister has arrived in Moscow for a major international security forum hosted by Russia. Well, the visit carries political significance coming months after Moscow formally recognized the Taliban-led government. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis reports now from Kabul.
Afghan Defense Minister Yaqub Mujahid's visit to Moscow is being closely watched here in Kabul. He is attending the first International Security Forum, which is being held in the Moscow region from May 26 to 29 under the auspices of Russia's Security Council. Russia's state media says the forum will bring together delegates from around 180 countries and organizations, including senior security, intelligence and diplomatic officials. The main focus of the discussions is expected to be regional security, shared threats and possible areas of cooperation. For Afghanistan, Yaqub Mujahid's attendance carries clear political weight. It comes after Russia became the first country to formally recognize the Taliban-led authorities in July 2025. At that time, Moscow accepted the credential of Afghanistan's new ambassador after removing the Taliban from its list of banned organizations. Analysts say the forum gives Kabul a chance to engage with regional security officials, while showing Russia's growing ties with the Taliban authorities. For now, Afghan officials have presented the visit as part of wider efforts to discuss security cooperation and regional stability. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Japan is stepping into the Caspian Sea crisis with a new $3 million environmental project in Kazakhstan. The focus is on water monitoring and protection as falling levels raise wider concerns for the middle corridor linking Asia and Europe. Fariza Kalamazina reports now from Almaty.
Japan is joining efforts to address the growing crisis of the Caspian Sea. Together with the UN Development Program, Tokyo is launching a new $3 million environmental project in Kazakhstan focused on protecting the sea and improving water monitoring systems. The project will be implemented with Kazakhstan's ministries responsible for ecology and water resources. Particular attention will be given to the northern Caspian, one of the areas most affected by falling water levels. The issue also has broader regional implications. The Caspian is a key link in the Trans-Caspian transport route, or the so-called middle corridor connecting Asia and Europe. The future of this trade route was discussed during last year's Central Asia plus Japan talks. Experts say lower sea levels could eventually affect shipping, port operations and trade moving across the corridor, adding to concerns already surrounding the region's environmental challenges. Scientists link the Caspian's decline to climate change, rising temperatures, stronger evaporation and lower river inflows, while pressure on water resources continues to grow. Kazakhstan has already allocated nearly $2 million for marine monitoring equipment to better understand the scale of the problem. Environmental experts warn the situation is already critical, with projections suggesting the sea level could approach minus 33 meters in the Baltic Height system by 2050. Fariza Kalimurzaina, Almaty, A News.
Uzbekistan's World Cup journey has moved from history-making qualification to final preparations as the football national side departed for the United States ahead of its Group K campaign. Seville Rajapova has more.
The Uzbekistan national football team has officially departed for the United States ahead of the FIFA World Cup 2026. The team is beginning the final stage of preparations for the tournament, which will be hosted by the United States, Canada and Mexico. Earlier, the national team unveiled its final 30-player squad for the World Cup. The squad was announced by head coach Fabio Cannavaro, who is leading Uzbekistan into its first ever appearance at the tournament. Uzbekistan secured qualifications for the World Cup for the first time in its history after finishing among the top 2 teams in its Asian Football Cup qualifying group. The decisive result came on June 5, 2025, when the team earned a goalless draw against the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi to secure direct qualification alongside Iran. During the qualification campaign, Uzbekistan faced Iran, Qatar, Kyrgyzstan, North Korea and the United Arab Emirates. Key players in the squad include captain Eldor Shamuradov, Abbasbek Fayzulayev and Manchester City defender Abdulkadir Husanov. Notably, Uzbekistan is the only national team from Central Asia and the South Caucasus to qualify for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Uzbekistan will now compete in Group K, where it is scheduled to face Colombia on 18th June, Portugal on June 23rd, and DR Congo on June 28th. It is Seville Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
China has praised Pakistan's role in encouraging US-Iran dialogue while pledging support for regional stability during talks between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Beijing. Manor Makdoum reports.
China has lauded Pakistan's proactive and constructive role in the ongoing diplomatic effort to keep talks alive between Washington and Tehran. a recognition that comes as Islamabad has significantly stepped up its outreach to both sides in recent weeks. President Xi Jinping commended Islamabad directly, acknowledging that Shahbaz Sharif had just returned from Tehran. This exchange took place at the Great Hall of the People here in Beijing, where Chinese President Xi Jinping called Sharif an old friend and praised what he described as an unbreakable bond between the two countries. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also said that Beijing was willing to strengthen coordination with Pakistan on regional peace and stability, including the protection of trade and energy routes through the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. China has long maintained that dialogue and diplomacy are the only path to lasting peace in the Middle East, and Beijing sees its growing partnerships with countries like Pakistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia as central to that effort. Pakistan, for its part, has increasingly positioned itself as a credible mediator, a role that Beijing appears keen to support. Mania Makhtoom, A News, Beijing.
After the break, we'll take a look at more top stories. Don't go away. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Health officials are warning that the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda is outpacing efforts to contain it. Well, the World Health Organization says delays in detecting cases have left responders struggling to keep pace.
The head of the World Health Organization says the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda is outpacing response efforts, with suspected deaths now standing at 220. Speaking to an African Union meeting, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said delays in detecting Ebola cases meant responders were now playing catch-up, warning the outbreak was likely to get worse before it gets better. Uganda reported 2 additional Ebola cases this week, bringing its confirmed total to 7. The WHO Director General warned countries bordering Congo are at high risk and should take immediate action. Containment efforts are being complicated by insecurity in Congo's Ituri and North Kivu provinces, while there is no approved vaccine for the Bundibugyo strain. In Bukavu, demand for hand-washing stations has risen as residents and organizations respond to the outbreak, though doctors warn hygiene measures alone will not stop the spread.
China is facing another major test from extreme weather as emergency teams battle rising water levels across several provinces. The latest floods have turned deadly, with rescue operations underway and authorities releasing fresh disaster relief funds.
Heavy rain has battered several regions in China, triggering floods and landslides and causing widespread disruption, with search and rescue operations underway in hard-hit areas. Authorities in Chongqing municipality say at least 9 people have been killed, while efforts to locate 11 others remain ongoing. The southwestern region recorded 298.5 millimetres of rain in 24 hours, the heaviest on record. Water levels in several rivers running through the city rose above warning thresholds, with some exceeding critical safety limits. Floodwaters submerged multiple areas, forcing schools to suspend classes.
The floods came in no time, very quickly. In less than half an hour, the whole area was inundated.
In central Hubei province, emergency crews raced against time to reinforce endangered embankments as heavy rainfall raised lake levels.
We've built a 350-metre long and 1-metre wide levee after 6 hours of incessant efforts to prepare for the next round of rainfall in Jingzhou.
China's finance ministry says it has allocated 110 million yuan for flood disaster prevention and relief work. It follows an earlier disbursement of 120 million yuan a week ago for the same purpose.
Protests over the rising cost of living in Bolivia have entered a 4th week as demonstrators call on President Rodrigo Paz to resign. This comes as Paz announces cuts to his salary in an attempt to ease tensions.
Protesters and police clashed in the Bolivian capital, La Paz, on Monday as demonstrators continued to call for President Rodrigo Paz to resign. Protesters have set up dozens of blockades, leading to fuel and food shortages and causing hospitals to run out of oxygen cylinders. The nationwide movement, now in its fourth week, has seen labour unions, rural groups and workers pressure Paz's centrist government to reverse austerity measures and address rising living costs.
The people are demanding from the grassroots, from the blockade points, that the president must resign for his incapacity to govern for all Bolivians. The president only governs for one sector, an elite that is in Santa Cruz. Therefore, this fight is for the common good, for the national interest and for our future generations.
In an attempt to ease tensions, Paz announced that he would cut his own salary and those of his cabinet ministers by half, describing the move as a demonstration of the government's commitment to the country.
I want to inform you that this president, together with his ministers, has taken the decision as part of the effort and commitment to the country to lower his salary by 50% so that it contributes to a clear effort that Bolivia has a president and ministers who will join that effort. 50% of our salary will be reduced.
The president's monthly salary is currently around 24,000 Bolivianos, equivalent to about $3,500. It remains unclear whether the gesture will appease protesters. Previous attempts by Paz to ease the unrest, including dismissing an unpopular Labour minister and promising greater involvement for trade unions and indigenous groups in government policy, have failed to calm tensions.
Muslim pilgrims have gathered at Arafat in Saudi Arabia for one of the most important moments of the Hajj pilgrimage. Many spent the day in prayer and reflection at the Mount of Mercy, where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have delivered his final sermon.
Around 1.8 million Muslim pilgrims headed to Mount Arafat in western Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, marking the height of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. They moved from Mina at dawn, with Saudi security forces monitoring routes and walkways as part of wider crowd control measures. Saudi state media reported smooth traffic as pilgrims made their way to Arafat, where many climbed the Mount of Mercy at sunrise. The site is where Prophet Muhammad is believed to have delivered his final sermon 14 centuries ago. On the rocky hilltop, worshippers prayed, raised their hands and sat in quiet reflection, while some were overcome with emotion.
It's a feeling I can hardly describe, the feeling that God has granted us the chance to reach this place, to visit the place that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once visited. This is a great blessing and grace from God. Praise be to Allah.
Hajj is a once-in-a-lifetime duty for Muslims, who are physically and financially able to perform it. Pilgrims perform combined midday and afternoon prayers at Namira Mosque, before staying in Arafat until sunset and moving to Muzdalifah for the night. There, they will collect pebbles for the symbolic stoning ritual, which marks the start of Eid al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice, celebrated by Muslims around the world on Wednesday. The six-day pilgrimage began on Monday in Mina and will continue with the stoning ritual and the farewell circumambulation at the Grand Mosque in Mecca.
The group of countries known as the Quad has unveiled cooperation plans on energy security, critical minerals and infrastructure after talks in New Delhi as foreign ministers from Australia, India, Japan and the United States highlight efforts to strengthen regional resilience and supply chains.
The Quad has agreed to launch a new Indo-Pacific energy security initiative alongside a critical minerals framework following talks between foreign ministers in New Delhi on Tuesday.
The Quad Critical Minerals Framework, which will guide each of us to leverage economic policy tools and coordinate investment to strengthen critical mineral supply chains, including in mining and processing and in critical minerals recycling.
Turning to energy cooperation, Rubio added that the initiative will focus on strengthening regional resilience through cooperation on technology, policy, market analysis, and emergency response exercises. From Australia, Foreign Minister Penny Wong announced a new maritime infrastructure push, unveiling a ports partnership and a pilot project in Fiji.
We are also today announcing the strongest ever commitment from the Quad to the Pacific through the Quad Ports of the Future partnership, where we are launching a pilot for port infrastructure in Fiji. And I was in Fiji just a couple of weeks ago, and I know how important this will be to that country. It's a practical demonstration of our collective ability to deliver high-quality, resilient infrastructure in partnership with the region and in response to Pacific priorities.
Given the significant impact the situation in Iran is having on the Indo-Pacific region, particularly in terms of energy supply, we affirmed the importance of diplomatic efforts towards ensuring free and safe navigation of the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the stability of the Middle East. The Energy Security Initiative, aimed at securing a stable energy supply for the Indo-Pacific, comes at the right time. We intend to coordinate this with the Partnership on Wide Energy and Resources Resilience Asia, the cooperative framework our country is advancing for the procurement of resources, including crude oil and petroleum products.
Japan's Foreign Minister, Toshimitsu Motegi, also pointed to wider regional concerns around stability and safe maritime routes, including the Strait of Hormuz. Earlier in the meeting, India's Foreign Minister, S. Jaishankar, said the group must focus on addressing connectivity choke points and resource concentration across the region. The meeting brought together the top diplomats of Australia, India, Japan and the United States, marking the third Quad foreign ministers meeting since September 2024.
Now, after prime time tonight, A News will broadcast a new investigation into foreign interference in Armenia's elections. We're using exclusive secret recordings originally published by Minval Politica. Our A News documentary Target Yerevan reveals a shadow network of oligarchs, lobbyists and legal mercenaries plotting to stop the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process.
Moi, Luis Moreno Campo, déclare solennellement.
We've seen remarkable developments between Baku and Yerevan.
We are against all of this kind of peace.
Russia does not want Pashinyan to win. Russia wants perpetual conflict.
Region that's in conflict or in tension is better for their ability to play a role.
Russian oligarchs are less about money and more about political influence. Russia can make its own interventions through online postings.
Que je remplirai mes devoirs et exercerai mes attributions de procureur de la Cour pénale internationale.
Money in politics everywhere is corrupting influence, but when it becomes weaponized by a foreign power.
The main thing we have money. Too much resources, too much money.
The main topic is to change Pashinyan.
They have boss and big boss. Big boss which is in Russia.
L'impartialité et en toute conscience.
We are for pressuring Pashinyan. We are organizing rallies on the streets.
Et que je respecterai le caractère confidentiel de ces enquêtes.
They are election time. No. And election time is everything binary.
Nosotros pedimos que remuevan a Pashinyan.
Well, to discuss the pre-election situation in Armenia, A News' Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Orkan Amashov, joins me now in the studio. Orkan, always good to see you. Evidence of foreign interference then in Armenia's election, very serious situation. Lots of things clearly happening in the shadows that have now come to light. Tell us about what's been going on.
Well, a lot is happening. A lot is happening simultaneously. And naturally, you would notice that there are different forces, seemingly unrelated, but serving the same cause in the context of the pre-election situation in Armenia. That is our observation. There are certain patterns that do not need to be seen as being in the shadows. They have always been up there. For example, when Vladimir Putin was receiving Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan, said that there are certain forces inside Armenia's political landscape which do not have an opportunity to do what they have to do. And we want them to be proactive, to which Prime Minister Pashinyan reacted saying that if you have a Russian passport or any passport of any third country, you cannot be candidate for Member of Parliament. So there are certain things which are very obvious. Putin, Russian establishment, in particular Deputy Prime Minister Sergei Overchuk, have been openly talking about the fact that Russia's interests are not protected in Armenia. We see it in the context of Armenia's EU aspirations. Russian politicians are actually talking about the punishment. They're saying that, well, if Prime Minister Pashinyan wins and the pro-European policy continues, there will be certain repercussions. And Armenia will lose that preferential treatment. This is also part of that pre-election interference, or foreign interference. Also, naturally, very interesting characters like Luis Moreno Ocampo, for example, also being seen in that particular context. There have been a number of leaks over the past few months, of course, and they also reveal a particular picture that he has been working very actively with elements inside the European Parliament, trying to propagate certain narratives and working closely with Armenian diaspora, and also, of course, the Armenian diaspora in Russia as well, not just in the United States of America. So naturally, you see a number of forces working together. They may appear to be not so well connected, but they are actually connected. So the elements of the puzzle coming together, and you see the entire picture. And you're absolutely right. Naturally, certain things have come to light, and they will. The clarity is being intensified, and the full picture, I imagine, will be very visible very soon indeed. Yeah, foreign interference is there, evidently. I mean, I don't want to engage in this act of juxtaposition, but Azerbaijan is not really participating in anything related to Armenia. It's Armenia's internal affair. But actually, Azerbaijan wants peace, and whoever supports peace with Azerbaijan, naturally, is supporting Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. So Azerbaijan has got certain interest in this process as well, because Azerbaijan wants to have peace with Armenia. If those people who are opposing Prime Minister Pashinyan come to power, there will be no peace deal. This will be very bad for the region. There will be no Turkish-Armenian normalization. The perpetuation of the conflict as a key element which defined, sadly, this region over the decades will continue. Therefore, these elections are of consequence. So massively, certain elements are sort of clandestine. Yes. Certain elements are very obvious and public.
Yeah, and I think there'll be many viewers, Orkan, perhaps away from the region, sort of very independently minded, who will look at this idea that there are people who actively don't want peace, and they'll frankly be aghast.
There are certain elements to that wider alliance of forces in and out of Armenia who do not want peace. Naturally, we have three major parties there inside Armenia, one of them led by Robert Kocharyan, former president, arch enemy of the incumbent prime minister. We've got a party connected with Mr. Karapetyan, who is currently in jail. We do have the third party, which is also connected with those two parties. These people treat the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process and the initial peace agreement as something that needs to be revoked. They do not want to have peace with Azerbaijan. They have territorial claims towards Azerbaijan, and they have territorial claims towards Turkey. They want strong Russian presence in Armenia. For them, the continuation of the uncertainty is the best course of action. Armenian diaspora also perfectly aligns with that particular group, because Armenian diaspora is much stronger than Armenian state. And when diaspora and its narrative and ideology is based and built over the years on their trauma, and that trauma is being sort of removed from the landscape when these two countries have a peace deal, because that trauma in Armenian mindset is connected with the events of 1915, during the course of which both Turks and Armenians sadly perished. And so Azerbaijan-Armenian peace deal leading to Turkish-Armenian normalization naturally removes that element of animosity between Turks and Armenians. And diaspora is not interested in that. Diaspora does not necessarily care about the internal well-being of Armenian people, but they care about the continuation of the sense of loss and that enmity towards Turks, and by extension towards, of course, Azerbaijanis. So you've got diaspora, you've got church, which is very closely connected with Russia, obviously, and also with diaspora. And of course, you got sort of billionaire oligarch Mr. Karapetyan, who is obviously very connected with Russia. For it's a no-brainer, and against Prime Minister Pashinyan, connected with the church. And of course, you got some elements inside the European Parliament which seem to be acting against Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. So this kaleidoscope is sort of assuming its definable shape, and you see these forces are against Prime Minister Pashinyan, because Pashinyan initial peace agreement with Azerbaijan and is intent on signing the peace deal, and of course, by extension, they're against Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. They're against the Constitutive House of Caucasus, and they are in favor of Russia retaining its tools in the region. So basically, this is this sort of very interesting mentality, because let's be very clear, the reason why Azerbaijan and Armenia had been in conflict over the 30 years because of the occupation of Azerbaijan territories. That changed, of course. Azerbaijan restored its territorial integrity and sovereignty over Karabakh. And now, on that basis, Azerbaijan and Armenia are signing a peace deal. They have not signed it, they initially did. And these forces want to reverse that reality. And hence, they are against peace.
Many variables, many factors at play, many people involved, Orkan, in this. But most notably, you've got Mr. Ocampo seemingly in the centre of this, and some other individuals sort of orientating around it.
There are different characters, of course. I don't want to name all of them. The audience, in the fullness of time, will be familiarized with those personages of certain description. But Luis Moreno Ocampo is a very famous character because in Azerbaijan, many people heard about him back in 2023 in August when he wrote on X platform saying that he referred to the head of the separatist junta, which was back in existence in Karabakh, illegal separatist junta, saying that the leader of that group, asked me to write a report about the plight of Armenians in Karabakh, and I decided to write this report. Basically, he accused Azerbaijan back then of committing genocide against Armenian residents of Karabakh. That was his argument. There was a counter-argument against it. I mean, that particular argument, of course, was perpetuated, and now we understand the details of that sort of approach maintained by him. We understand the use of the artificial intelligence, social media manipulation, use of different hashtags. Sort of, if you want to make sure the world accepts certain sort of representation as a reality, you need to perpetuate that particular narrative, and also you need to use social media and other resources. Quite often, that sort of technology leads to certain perception, because we talk about shaping narratives, establishing perceptions, and effectively creating the false representation. And Luis Moreno Ocampo, of course, has been engaged in this activity, and now, on the basis of the leaks that have been published by Minval.az, we realize that he's been working very closely with Armenian diaspora, and quite often using his resources against the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia, because there seems to be sort of an alliance of forces actively engaged in the process of slackening Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process, sort of inducing slanders and libel against Azerbaijan, with a fundamental purpose of actually stopping the current process, because the current process, the current reality, is created subsequent to 2020 and 2023, and this reality is not within the interest of those people. And naturally, when you're connected with diaspora and you believe in the perpetuation of this victimhood mentality, which militates against Azerbaijan-Armenian peace, of course, naturally, you will do your level best to make sure that current geopolitical construct emerging in this region, based on Azerbaijan-Armenian peace, is being reversed.
Orkan, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Okay, well, viewers can see the TV premiere of Target Yerevan coming up just after Primetime. That is all we have for Primetime for this evening. Thank you very much for watching. Please do join us tomorrow for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.